Hi, everybody. Welcome to Every Home's Real Estate Trend. My name's Honish. I'm joined, as always, by David Bartels, broker owner. How are you today, David?
I'm doing just fine. Thank you very much. How are you, sir?
I'm good. Enjoying life. Weather's been phenomenal down here. I don't know what it's like up in LA, but in the LA area. But for us, it's been 75 degrees, slightly breezy, and lovely in San Diego. But the downside is we were last to get COVID, so now it's rolling through the city like the plague.
Nice.
Yeah, finally
I managed to avoid it. I'm staying close to home.
I am too. Somebody asked me the other day how often I've seen my daughter, and I said, I've seen her once in the last year. I talk to her every day, but my that household is very hypochondriac-ish. I wrote a word there, but hypochondriac-ish.
I like it.
Is everybody safe and healthy up there?
Everybody's fine. We're doing just fine.
Excellent. Excellent.
I even have my groceries delivered now.
I'm pretty close to that. If my place wasn't in walking distance, I'd probably have groceries delivered. With all of that said, you are on Every Home's Real Estate Trend. This show is for consumers, real estate professionals, anybody who's interested in knowing what's going on from a trend perspective and what that means for your house. David Bartels is a broker owner. I'm a marketing specialist, and we hope to bring you some insight into the world of real estate. We do this live each and every week on Wednesdays. If you feel like joining us, just let us know. Drop David a line, david@everhome.io, and he'll get you all the information. With that said, this show is sponsored and brought to you by Everhomes. Find out about Everhomes. It is an online brokerage for one low set fee. Just visit Everhome, everhome.io, and find out about the Everhome way. Simple as that. We have a lot to talk about. I want to start right here, David. Last week, we had said that there would be nothing dramatic that would change the real estate market, more or less. It would take something dramatic. And we jokingly said civil war.
Yes, we did. I'd forgotten about that.
And I told a few people about that, and they go, well, how close did you get? I said, we got close to hitting that one right on the baseball bat ball thing. So we nearly had a civil war last week, David. Let's just hypothetically play this out because you and I watch the news on a daily basis and watch the trends. They're talking about storming the capitals over the next 3 to 5 days. And while I've planned my trip to leave the mainland and go to Hawaii, where it's safe, because I figure if this place goes to hell, at least I'll be in Hawaii while it happens. Tell me, from your perspective, if we have something dramatic where half the country is at odds with the other half, no political bias from either of us, what do you think would happen to real estate or real estate transactions if this really got serious?
Well, I don't know what serious means. I mean, I think it got serious enough for most people's taste. And, and I don't think the people who stormed the Capitol really represent the bulk of America. And so you've got a vocal minority, I think is, the way that they say it. But, at the end of the day, what happens in real estate is really driven by supply and demand. So, how deep it gets really depends on how it impacts buyers' willingness to purchase real estate in a time of unrest. So sellers might, that kind of scenario where people all of a sudden panic and think the world's coming to an end as they want to leave the country and decide they're going to go live in Canada or wherever people go when they flee the United States for greener pastures. If a lot of inventory came on the market as a result of that and buyers were sitting on the fence not thinking they wanted to do it, it could have a very dramatic impact on real estate, the number of transactions and the value of those transactions. But it doesn't look like that is going to happen. And I don't think that we were ever really near. It was awful to watch on TV. I was just mortified that what was happening, but nonetheless, a few hours and it looks to be back at normal, and we'll kind of see how that rolls out. There's a lot of political rhetoric around it now, as you know.
I think the word I'd use is disappointment. These are full-grown adults.
Yeah.
It really.
Of course, there are people that might be listening to this that might think it was great. I'm not, for each its own, but I just prefer the what are the impasse that that they have over that. That's not it's not the foundation America was founded on. Use your word. I can hear my mother. Use your words.
Use your words. Use your words.
Use your
I
words.
completely agree. Use your words. Well, we are going to talk fairly politically speaking, which is a rarity for both of us. Run by Republican representatives for we got the first black senator from Georgia. We have a fully Democratic institution now. So let's just start right there. I was actually surprised that it took 56 years to actually for Georgia to elect a black official. It's really kind of sad, actually, in a way. But that's the first point that they make. Times are changing. And it is painful for this country. It always has been. It's a historical fact. So let's start right there. Do you see dramatic things happening with the shift to it all moving to a Democratic representation? Can't hear you. Why can't I hear you?
Doing stimulus checks and doing tax incentives for lower income people. It doesn't mean they don't do it, and it doesn't mean they don't care about it. The idea of the Republican Party is really to be the party of fiscal responsibility, and they've really drifted from that over these past few years with Trump in office, actually, which was a little surprising for a lot of people. But then you kind of saw them dig in after that first stimulus package. I guess there was 3 or 4 of them early on, but as they negotiated this last package that they're talking about getting done, I guess part of which they got done a week or so ago, and the rest of it they're probably going to do after Biden takes office, you really saw them pushing back, and they weren't able to really get it done. That piece of the legislation that they could not get done, namely the $2,000 stimulus checks, that is going to happen, probably the first week. The week of January 20th. And so I think that's going to be good. That'll put all that money will likely end up in the economy. That'll be good for overall GDP. It's not going to stimulate more housing purchases at this point. But what it does do is it just gives people confidence, and consumer confidence is a massive driver of whether or not people want to buy and sell houses. And so from that perspective, I think it's going to be really positive. The downside of that, maybe, depending on what side of the housing that you're on, is that they're very likely to extend the foreclosure moratorium. I mean, we don't know what that's going to look like yet. For me, I feel like these mom and pop landlords have really been punished enough. The moratorium for renters who haven't been able or willing to pay during COVID. So I don't know. You're going to see a lot of things, but I don't think it's bad for home ownership overall.
No, I don't think it's bad for home ownership overall. I'm just wondering from the perspective of, okay, so let's take it in order. The $2,000 stimulus and creating better confidence. I try not to lean into conspiracy theory that this is all about big business getting the push and the little guys getting squeezed out, and this is all some kind of socialist society we're creating where we created a handout. I think COVID is very real, and I don't think I understand that 99% of us aren't going to be affected by COVID, but 1% of 300 million people is a lot of people, and I don't think people really get the impact that COVID has had over the past year to everything. The only thing it hasn't affected really is real estate. Real estate seems to be completely independent of the COVID situation. It is the only thing that seems to be independent of the COVID situation. So let's start with confidence in regards to COVID. Are we on the verge of, from your perspective, do we think that the vaccine will have an impact? I think we're still, my perspective, 6 months to a year from normal still, maybe.
Well, I don't know how long it takes to vaccinate everybody, but I know that there, I mean, just from the headlines, I'm no expert here, but just from the headlines that I see, it seems to be that there's some bottlenecks and just getting the frontline workers done. And there's a lot of confusion about how that's being administered, how you get it. I keep seeing announcements that they're using these big sports stadiums in order to become inoculation centers. I saw Disneyland was going to be one of those places where you can go. But what is foggy to me is who's allowed to go get it. So I don't know who's eligible, who's not eligible. And if you're doing frontline workers, it would seem to me that they would just do that right inside their own clinics and hospitals, wherever they're administering care. I would think that would be the place that they get it. So if healthcare workers can get inoculated at their place of business, who's going to Disneyland or Dodger Stadium or Giant Stadium, wherever you are in the world, to get the inoculation? So I don't know. And then each state is doing it differently. And in Florida, my mother-in-law went and got her first COVID test, or her first COVID vaccine. She's got to get a second one, and she got it simply by calling the hospital and said, no, not today, no, not. And she just called every day until she said, yeah, come on down. And it was 3 or 4 days into her, I'm going to call every day until I can get one, until she got one. Now, I asked her, how do you get your second one? She says, I'm not sure. So, and it's largely ineffective until you get the second one. So I don't know.
Interesting. Which takes us to the next piece of and what I suspect is there will be an aggressive push through the House of Representatives and Congress, and certainly with the president, to expedite more funding. That certainly doesn't seem like it would have a lot of blowback. From your perspective, do you think either party, I don't want to get into finger pointing on who puts fat on bills, but do you see them aggressively trying to get this pushed through and forward, especially with sort of a...
this seems to be the big problem with the political process, right? You take a stimulus bill that's designed to really help ease some of the discomfort that people are experiencing as a result of working from home or not being able to work at all. And then you start getting some of, I think they call it pork in the old days, maybe they still call it that, but some of these, pet projects that people have trading stimulus in a congressional district in exchange for a vote. And, and I'd like to think that for something, especially something like this, that you wouldn't do some of that horse trading that apparently takes place in order to get a bill done. Now, what I know about how bills get done, I learned from what's the Netflix show, where Kevin Spacey is on.
Yeah, sure.
House of Cards.
House of Cards. Yeah. Strangely, I learned from the ABC After School specials with the animated little rolled up piece of paper saying, "I'm just a bill." So, right, so I think we're both qualified to talk on the topic.
Exactly. So, so we'll see. I think at the end of the day, listen, housing has a reckoning here. I mean, there's going to be a reckoning. And I think one of the reasons why housing is doing okay is that Congress together has figured out how to push that through the forbearance program and, and the PPP, that, the Paycheck Protection Program has really helped a company even like me, where we were able to not just keep employees, but add employees as a result of getting that stimulus. And we probably wouldn't have had the confidence to do that if we didn't get a little incentive from the government to be able to do that. And I don't know how many people are still employed because of it, but I know that it's a good way to keep people at work. And, and I'd like to think in the long run, it's less expensive than unemployment benefits. And it's certainly good for the overall economy, I think. The problem
yeah. Go ahead.
Just one last thought. And sooner or later, we're going to have to reckon all these people who have not been paying their mortgage and all these people who have not paying their rent. And it seemed to me, in retrospect, that maybe everybody, the Republicans in general were pushing it they wanted to push it into the new presidential cycle, whoever was going to win and tackle it then. And it seems like Biden's and the Democrats' incentive here might be to push it out a little longer so they're not dealing with it in the first few months of his presidency. Because if they were to enforce the foreclosures and the evictions that are very likely to take place, it would put major downward pressure on housing. And I don't think anybody's ready to quite deal with that yet. And they're hoping that people are going to get jobs and get back to work and be able to resume making mortgage payments or repayment plans to their landlords in lieu of foreclosure or eviction. So I think that's what they're hoping to have happen. Whether or not that happens or not, I don't know. They're going to have to put a lot of gas in the tanks of businesses to do that, I think.
So let's take them line by line, the three most pressing items that have to be addressed immediately on the 20th, excluding a civil war, because I can already see the title of this particular episode, excluding a civil war. These are the three pressing items that certainly the House and Congress have to discuss in no particular order, but I would think the most important, I'm going to start from the bottom up. What are we doing about the eviction moratorium? Nobody has talked about it, David. This is a very serious thing now that's literally running out of time. And I blame both sides for this, just so everybody gets my politics straight. I think that the Democratic side literally took the perspective of we're not going to approve anything they say, and they took the perspective of we're not going to approve anything they say, and they clashed, right? Even the 60 Minutes piece with Pelosi gave me the intention of I wasn't going to do anything even if it was good for the country. I'm just not going to approve their agenda. That was kind of the vibe. And Democrats, please don't get mad. And Republicans, please don't get mad. I'm just telling you, as a person watching that 60 Minutes piece, that was the feeling I got. Well, here's the bad news, David. We're up against the wall on this moratorium thing. People are going to start to be evicted. The clock is starting in some locations.
Yeah, in California it started.
Right. What do you think should happen immediately? An extension, from your perspective, where do you see the moratorium and the evictions going?
Well, personally, my personal position is I'm not for it. I mean, I'd like to see it get worked out. I mean, this is kind of like, these shadow inventory conversations we used to have, right? Yep. All these foreclosures that are in the background that this real estate owned by banks that was going to find its way into the market never did, right? We still don't know where that shadow inventory is. They ended up, I think that they ended up bundling up and selling to these big, public hedge funds,
Yep.
And they created a whole new industry of own to rent companies. So I'd like to see it reconciled, whatever it's going to be. I do not favor homelessness. I do not favor foreclosures. I advocate very hard for people who are facing foreclosure, every day still. So that's not what I'm for, but I would like to see some, transparency. Now, and the reason I'm a little gray on my question, my response is, apparently there's $25 billion in rental assistance that's coming forth. I don't have no idea about how that is going to be applied. Who's going to get it? Is that money going to go to landlords? Is it going to go to tenants? And then are the landlords going to use that money to pay the banks? I don't know how that money is going to be used. And if we knew, and I'm not sure anybody else knows other than they've set it aside. Now they've got to figure out how they're going to best apply it in order to keep people, sheltered, in their home. But sooner or later, we're going to have to reckon with it. And I don't know if delaying it, if it's one of those things that makes it better or worse, or if the right strategy is just to rip the Band-Aid off and reveal what it is and start that 90, 120, 180 day clock, whatever it's going to be, to really, force the reckoning that it's going to be, and have people, make the transitions, as unpleasant as it is, in order to really right size housing.
Which takes us to item 2. It's not on our list per what we were discussing this week. This is one of those curveballs, as we discussed in our meeting. There has to be an aggressive jobs package, I would think, for the incoming president, for the House, for Congress. Like, this should be a priority. We've put a lot of places out of business. Our economies, I say this all the time in San Diego, what do these people do to afford the places that we live in? I get what I have to do, but it's very expensive, certainly in California, and a lot of people are out of work. You can't constantly give money to people, right? We're back to the PPP. We're back to, unemployment benefits. This is kind of a twofold question, David. Do you see him focusing more on trying to stimulate with money, or do you see him trying to stimulate more with a jobs package?
Well, I see two things. Well, first of all, the whole objective of PPP is to keep people employed, okay, or to re-employ people. That's really, number one. So we're going to apply for it again. I think that we're eligible to apply for it today, but my bank's not ready to take an application. So they're saying it might be a week or two before we can do that. And I think that what you might see is some tax credits for businesses that are hiring people who are unemployed. So, if you can get, either one of those would be helpful to us. I mean, we would certainly use the money to hire more people, and to really grow. So I think that what we're doing at Everhome is really exactly what they like to see the money used for, and that is to not just keep your people, but to add more people, to stimulate company growth, which stimulates job growth. And if you have 1 million businesses or 5 million, it's a big country, 5 million businesses, all adding 1-2 jobs, it makes it moves the needle, a decent amount. So, I think some tax credits for hiring unemployed people would be great. I think I'm excited about PPP. I don't really know how it's going to work this time around, but I think those are steps in the right direction. I'll tell you, some of the way that the government has created jobs in the past was through entitlements, and they do these big road projects. They build highways and bridges and infrastructure.
Sure.
And I know a little something about that, but what I don't like about that is that the cost of doing business with the government for a business is about 3 times as much. And the reason for that is if you've got employees that will take a non-government contracted or non-union job, if you will, I'm not sure the language, those people can, they pay those people $25, $30, $40 an hour to do some of that work. But if you take a government funded job, one of these infrastructure projects, and you are fortunate enough to win that bid and work on it, you're having to pay them at a scale that is 2 or 3 times what you would pay your people. So the way it works in these companies, that employ people that work on some private projects and some public, projects, when they work on the public project, they make $30 an hour, or the private project, they make $30 an hour. When they work on the public project, they got to pay them $70 an hour. And so there's an imbalance there. And I'm not saying that people don't deserve $70 an hour. That's not the point of the conversation. The point of the conversation is that instead of paying some people $70, if you paid competitive wages, okay, the $30 an hour example versus the $70 an hour, you could employ a lot more people at $30 an hour than you can at $70 an hour. And if you really want to stimulate jobs, that is the way to do it, and to try to do it in a longer term basis as opposed to the project, basis that a lot of these contracts are run under.
Last but not least, and we talked about it a little earlier, the third most important thing, probably and this is the question I have. So we're getting $600. They're going to send out another $2,000 or $4,000 per married couple. They call it the Caring for Americans with Supplemental Help, the cash program. Can they just constantly keep throwing money at the problem? I would imagine at $8 trillion, it doesn't really matter anymore, but that's just me from a banking perspective.
In for a penny, in for a pound, I guess.
Yeah, right.
See, this is what Republicans used to be for, about worrying about the national debt and that kind of thing,
right,
and not running this kind of deficit that we have. That was the Republican Party's platform, right? Fiscal responsibility, less government, less regulation, less interference, lower the cost, make it easier for, and put the responsibility for growing the economy on the businesses, and then give the businesses, the tools that they need in order to compete in the world, and what we is now a global economy, right? And so, that's the problem anyway. So I don't know what the impact of that is on our kids or grandkids or their kids. I mean, but I worry about it. How much, the amount of money you're paying China, on interest only is, only empowers them to compete, unfairly.